The first time you realize something is still following you, it isn't a scream or a shadow. It's the quiet certainty that the air behind you is occupied. A reflection that lingers half a second too long. Footsteps that stop when you stop. Some horror doesn't end when you survive, it simply learns your route home. If you enjoy true horror stories whispered from the dark, don't forget to subscribe, if you dare. Welcome to Mr. BlackWhisper. I took the overnight shift because nights were simple. Fewer people, fewer problems, less pretending. The hospital changed after midnight. The fluorescents hummed lower, the air cooled, and every corridor turned into a long, pale tunnel that made you feel like you were walking inside a throat. Ward C was the oldest part of the building. You could tell by the tile worn down into soft dips, sand by the doors that never shut all the way unless you leaned your shoulder into them. The patients there were mostly long-term, quiet names, quiet rooms. People who had been fading for so long that everyone stopped expecting miracles. That week, we had a new admission. No family listed, no emergency contact. Just a name written in hard block letters on the chart. Mara Ellis, and a note from intake, does not speak. Startle response. Refuses mirrors. I didn't think much of it. People came in with odd fears all the time. Hospitals were a museum of human terror needles, tubes, oxygen masks, the sound of a cart rolling down a hall when you can't move your legs. My first round, I paused outside her room because the door was open a crack. And the light inside wasn't the usual hospital white. It was dimmer, as if the bulb was tired. The room smelled wrong, too like wet paper and old pennies. She lay on her side with her face turned toward the wall. Her hair was dark and flat against the pillow like it had been pressed there for days. The mirror above the sink had been covered with a towel. I made a note to ask housekeeping why and kept moving. On my second round, the towel was gone. The mirror was bare, catching the low light and turning it into a rectangle of dull shine. I stopped at the doorway, hand on the frame, and the feeling hit me thin and immediate that the reflection inside that mirror did not belong to the room. Not a figure, not a face, just an absence, like someone had been erased. I stepped in, forcing myself to breathe normally. It's easy to make anything feel supernatural at 2 in the morning when you're tired and the building creaks like an old ship. Her eyes were open. She was staring straight ahead toward the mirror. I walked to the side of her bed and checked the monitor. Numbers were steady, pulse regular. The sound of her breathing was small and wet. I tried to be gentle, the way you learn to be in places where people are always afraid. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her gaze stayed on the mirror as if something was happening there that only she could see. By 3, I started noticing other things. The security doors on Ward C, the ones that had always clicked shut with a comforting finality, began to latch softly, like they were being held back at the last second. The call bell at the nurse's station lit up twice with no room number listed, just a blank, steady glow, as if the system couldn't decide where the request was coming from. And the mere small ones in bathrooms. Polished steel on supply cabinets looked duller than they should have, like breath had fogged them and never cleared. I told myself it was maintenance. Old wiring, old building, old me, getting jumpy. But then I passed Mara's room again and saw the towel back over the mirror, tightly knotted at the top as if someone had twisted it in panic. And Mara was crying without making a sound, just tears sliding sideways into the pillow. I didn't touch her. Something about her stillness made me careful, like she was a sleeping animal that might bite if startled. I stood there too long, listening. The room wasn't silent. It never is in a hospital. There's always air vents and monitors and distant footsteps. But beneath it, there was another rhythm. A soft, slow tapping like fingernails against glass. It was coming from the mirror. I took a step closer. The towel was stretched tight, pressed inward in the center, as if something behind it was pushing gently outward. My throat closed. My skin prickled with heat and cold at the same time. The tapping stopped. For a moment, nothing moved. Mara's breathing stayed shallow. Her eyes were wide and fixed on the covered mirror. Then the towel shifted, not falling, not slipping. It shifted like something beneath it had turned its head. I didn't run. I wish I could say I did something smart, like call security. But my body locked up in that terrible way it does when your brain realizes something before your legs can accept it. The towel bulged outward once, slowly, like a face pressing from the inside. You could see the outline of a forehead, a nose, a mouth that didn't open but stretched the fabric as if it was smiling. Mara's lips trembled, her chest hitched, and then the call bell rang from her room, right, insistent, like she'd smashed it. But her hands never moved. The towel snapped loose on its own, falling to the sink in a heavy clump. The mirror was clear. My reflection stood there, pale and rigid, eyes too wide. And behind me, in the mirror, someone else was standing close enough that I should have felt their breath on my neck. But when I turned, the room was empty. I looked back at the mirror. The figure behind me was still there. It was not a blur or a shadow. It was sharp. A woman's shape, tall and thin, hair hanging forward like it had been soaked and left to dry. Her face was angled down toward my shoulder, as if she was reading something written on my skin. My reflection didn't move. The woman in the mirror lifted her hand, and my shoulder, my real shoulder, went cold. Not the air, not the room, my skin. From the inside out. I stumbled backward, hitting the bed rail. Mara let out a sound then, the first sound I'd heard from her. It was a whisper that didn't belong in a hospital. Single phrase, thin as thread. The next moment, the lights in her room flickered, and the mirror went dark, like it had swallowed all the brightness. When the overhead steadied again, the mirror showed only me. Alone, Mara's monitor began to alarm. I did what my hands were trained to do. I called for help. I checked her airway. I pressed the code button. I moved like a professional, like a person who believes the world has rules. She died before the team arrived. After, the charge nurse asked me if Mara had said anything, if she'd complained of pain, if she'd asked for anyone. I shook my head and signed the paperwork with a pen that felt too light. They moved her body out before dawn. Housekeeping came in, took the towel, wiped the mirror, and left the room blank again, ready for the next quiet name. I tried to forget it. Then, a week later, I came home from another night shift, walked into my bathroom, and froze. A towel had been tied around my mirror, knotted tightly at the top. And from behind it, something tapped softly, patiently, like it had finally learned where I live. You don't have to believe in ghosts to understand what it means to be claimed. I used to drive nights for extra money. The city paid better after midnight because fewer people wanted to ride in the dark, and fewer drivers stayed out long enough to see what the roads looked like when the world stopped performing. At first, it was easy. Airport runs, bar pickups, quiet commuters who smelled like coffee and loneliness. Then I got the request near the edge of town, where the streetlights thin out and the houses sit back from the road like they don't want to be noticed. The pickup pin was on a frontage road beside an abandoned gas station. No cars, no porch lights, just a dead sign and a lot of black space behind it. I almost canceled. But the fare was good, and I told myself not to be dramatic. I pulled up, kept the doors locked, and waited. Someone approached from the darkness. Not fast, not slow, just steady, as if they already knew I wouldn't leave. When they stepped into my headlights, I saw it was a woman in a light coat that looked too thin for the cold. Her hair was pulled back, but loose strands clung to her cheeks like damp threads. She got into the back seat without hesitation. The car filled with the smell of rain on warm pavement, even though the night was dry. I started the trip. The destination was a residential address across town. As we pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror and saw her eyes, Not wild, not empty. Focused, like she was watching something behind me. I told myself it was just nerves. Late night passengers get strange. You learn not to ask. But then my navigation voice chimed, and the screen blinked. The route changed. No detours indicated. No traffic alerts. Just a new path that led away from the city and toward the highway. I looked at the address, same destination. My hands tightened on the wheel. I corrected the route manually, steering back toward well-lit streets. The navigation fought me. The blue line snapped back to the highway as if someone else was dragging it. In the mirror, the woman's mouth curved slightly. It wasn't a smile meant for me. It was satisfaction. I cleared my throat and forced my voice into something normal. I told her the app was acting up. I said I'd take the fastest way. She didn't answer. She leaned forward just a little, and the car temperature dropped by 2 degrees without the heater changing. I kept driving toward town anyway. Streetlights returned. Other cars appeared. The sense of isolation loosened its grip. For a moment, I felt stupid. Then, at a red light, the engine stalled. Not a sputter, not a warning. It simply stopped, like the car had decided it was done. My dash went dark. The radio cut to silence. Even the clock blinked out. The traffic light above me stayed green for everyone else. Cars flowed past my dead vehicle as if I wasn't there. Achaia, nothing. Behind me, the woman breathed out, slow and steady. As if she was fogging glass, my phone vibrated. A notification from the rideshare app. New route suggested. Faster. The map on the screen was now only a single line straight to the highway. My throat went tight. My mind searched for rational explanations. Battery, alternator, glitch, anything. I tried the ignition again. And the engine turned over instantly, like it had been waiting for permission. The dash came alive. The clock returned. The radio hissed and then resumed. I sat there, heart pounding, watching the map. The blue line still pointed toward the highway. I turned onto it. I told myself I was choosing the path of least resistance. That's what we always tell ourselves when something feels wrong. The highway at night is its own world. Dark fields on both sides. Long stretches with no exits. The kind of road where your thoughts get loud because there's nothing else to listen to. The woman in the back seat sat perfectly still. Every few minutes, I glanced in the mirror, and each time she seemed closer, though I never saw her move. At mile marker 14, the navigation told me to take an exit that shouldn't have existed. I'd lived here my whole life. I knew the highway. There was no exit at 14, but there it was. A ramp opening into darkness, unlit, unmarked. I passed it. The car shuddered. Not from the road, from the inside. The headlights dimmed. The engine strained like it was climbing a hill. In the mirror, the woman's eyes widened slightly, and I understood the look. Not anger. Hunger. I slowed, pulled onto the shoulder, and forced myself to breathe through shaking hands. I told myself I would end the ride. I would refund it. I would take whatever rating hit came with it. I would not follow a glowing blue line into unmarked darkness. I turned to look at her. The back seat was empty. But the smell of rain was stronger now, thick enough to taste. My reflection in the rearview mirror wasn't just mine anymore. Behind my head, pressed close, was her face, pale, wet-haired. Eyes open to wide, like she was leaning over my shoulder from a place the car didn't have room for. The steering wheel jerked in my hands. The car rolled forward on its own, easing back into the lane. I fought it. I braked. I gripped. I swore under my breath. The car didn't listen. It drifted toward mile marker 14 again, as if guided by a gentle hand. The exit appeared, black mouth, waiting, and on the side of the ramp, in the weak wash of my headlights, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A small memorial, flowers turned brown. A framed photograph bleached by sun. A handwritten sign that read, "She never made it home." My hands went numb. My body moved without decision. I turned onto the exit. The darkness swallowed the headlights. A road narrowed. Trees pressed in close, branches forming a tunnel overhead. My phone lost signal. The app froze. The car kept going. And then, up ahead, I saw a second car carped sideways across the road, as if abandoned in a hurry. Its hazard lights blinked slowly, steady as a heartbeat. I recognized the dent on the rear bumper. I recognized the scratch on the tailgate, because I'd put them there. I slammed the brakes. The tires screamed. The world went silent. And in that silence, I realized something with cold clarity. This wasn't a passenger. It was a route, a loop. A place where the living are taught to return. I don't remember getting back to the highway. I only remember sitting in my driveway at dawn with my car still running, hands clenched so hard my knuckles ached. On my phone, the ride was marked complete, 5 stars. And the destination address was my home. Sometimes the thing that follows you doesn't walk behind you, sometimes it drives. House sitting sounded harmless. A quiet neighborhood, a clean place. A week of easy money while the owners visited family out of state. They left a list on the counter. Watered the plants, don't touch the locked basement door. Reset the alarm before bed. Feed the cat. The house was newer than most, but it had that staged, too perfect feeling, like it was always waiting for a realtor to walk through. The first night, I slept poorly. Not because of noises, because of how quiet it was. Houses make a different kind of silence when no one belongs in them. The air feels held back. The shadows feel intentional. Around 2 a.m., I woke with my heart racing, convinced someone was standing in the doorway of the guest room. There was nothing there, just darkness shaped like a person would be. I sat up, listened, and heard the soft click of the thermostat turning on. Then the sound of a door closing, slow and careful. I told myself it was the house settling. Pipes, vents, old wood. In the morning, the cat watched me like it didn't recognize me. It stayed low to the floor, ears angled back, eyes fixed on the space behind my legs, as if something moved there when I wasn't looking. The second night, I started noticing the mirrors. Not because they were haunted in some obvious way, because they seemed busy. Every time I passed one, I caught motion in the reflection that didn't match what I was doing. A sway of my arm when my arms were still, a tilt of my head when I was walking straight. Little delays, tiny errors, like the reflection was learning me. I avoided the mirrors after that. I brushed my teeth, looking at the sink. I washed my hands, staring at the faucet. I walked through the hall without glancing at the framed photos or the polished glass of the living room cabinet. But you can't avoid every reflection. On the third night, I walked into the kitchen for water and saw myself in the dark window. Except I wasn't standing the way I was standing. My real body was tired, shoulders slumped, hair messy. The reflection stood straighter. Its head was cocked to one side, like it was listening. I froze. The reflection didn't. It lifted its hand slowly and pressed its palm flat to the glass from the inside. My own hand stayed at my side. A chill moved through me, not like cold air, but like the absence of warmth where it should have been. I backed away, breath shallow, eyes locked on the window. The reflection followed me with its gaze. Then it smiled. Not a wide, theatrical smile. Small one, like a private joke. I turned on every light in the kitchen. The window became just a window again, dark outside, bright inside. My reflection returned to normal. I tried to laugh it off, tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, that my eyes were playing tricks in low light, but the cat wouldn't come near me anymore. The next morning, I found muddy footprints on the hallway runner. Bare feet, small, child-sized. They started near the basement door, and they ended at the guest room where I slept. I checked the locks. Alarm system showed no breaches. Kai called the homeowner to ask, casually if they had kids, if a neighbor ever came in. If the basement door had some weird latch, they laughed too easily and said, "No, no, and please don't go down there." That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch with the TV on low, not watching, just letting the sound fill the house so it wouldn't feel like the walls were leaning in. Around 3 a.m., the TV cut out. The screen went black. My reflection appeared in a dim, ghostly. And behind my reflection, down the hallway, I saw someone standing near the basement door. Not tall, not threatening. Just wrong in the way it held itself, as if it didn't have bones in the correct places. It started walking toward me. In the black TV screen, it moved like a shadow freed from its owner. I turned my head toward the hallway in real life. Nothing was there. I snapped my gaze back to the TV. The thing was closer now, almost behind my reflected shoulder. I stood up so fast my knees hit the coffee table. Pain didn't matter. Only distance did. I backed toward the front door, keeping my eyes on the black screen, watching the reflection world move when the real world stayed still. The front door was locked. My fingers shook. The deadbolt resisted, as if someone on the other side was holding it gently in place. On the TV, my reflection wasn't backing away anymore. It was walking forward, toward the thing, like it wanted to meet it. The deadbolt clicked open. I yanked the door wide and stumbled onto the porch. Cold night air hit me hard, clean and real. I sucked it in like it was oxygen after drowning. I didn't go back inside. I sat in my car until sunrise, watching the house. At dawn, the windows turned soft gray. The place looked normal again, quiet, innocent. When the homeowners returned that afternoon, I didn't tell them the details. I just handed back the keys and said the house felt off. They smiled politely, the way people do when they've heard something they don't want to acknowledge. As I walked away, I passed the living room window and caught my reflection. It paused, just for a second, while I kept walking. And in that pause, it smiled that small, private smile again. Some houses don't need you to leave. They only need you long enough to learn your shape. The storage facility was a simple job. A fenced-in grid of metal doors, cameras on every corner, a small office with a coffee maker that tasted like burnt plastic. Most nights were dead. You'd hear a raccoon knock over a can or a car pass on the highway beyond the back fence. The wind would move through the rows and make the doors rattle like teeth. I worked alone. That was the deal. Less payroll, more trust. The first time I noticed Locker 29, it was because the lock was different. Most tenants used cheap padlocks. Locker 29 had a heavy, old-fashioned one, the kind you'd see on a gate near a river. It wasn't on my list as delinquent. No issues? Paid on time. But every night around 1:40 a.m., the camera feed for row D would fuzz slightly, like someone breathed on the lens. Only for a second. Only on that row. I filed a maintenance request. The tech came, checked connections, shrugged. Everything was fine. After that, I started paying attention. At 1:39 a.m., the cameras were crisp. At 1:40 a.m., row D fuzzed. 1:41 a.m., it cleared. Always the same, like a schedule. The rational part of me told myself it was a timed power draw, an old light sensor, an electrical hiccup. But the irrational part, the part that watches shadows in your peripheral vision, told me it was something else. One night, I walked out to row D with a flashlight and my keys, not to open anything, just to stand there and prove to myself it was nothing. The rows were long and straight, repeating doors with numbers stenciled in black. The air smelled like dust and metal and old cardboard. Locker 29 sat midway down the row. The padlock looked wet, not with rain, with something thicker. My flashlight beam hit the metal and I saw streaks, like someone had dragged their fingers down it. I stepped closer. The sound around me changed, The wind dropped and everything became still, like the facility was holding its breath. I glanced up at the nearest camera. The red indicator light was off. I looked back toward the office. Every camera indicator on row D was dark. My radio crackled once, a single burst of static that sounded like a whisper trying to become language. I backed away from locker 29. The padlock clicked. Just once, a small sound like a tongue against teeth. I stopped. In the seam of the door where the metal met metal, a thin line of darkness widened slightly, as if the door had flexed outward. A smell slipped out. Not rot, not garbage. Something older, like the inside of a basement that has never seen sunlight. I walked faster back to the office, trying not to run, because running would mean admitting fear. I shut the office door, locked it, sat down, and stared at the monitors. Row D was fuzzy. It was 1:40 a.m. The fuzz wasn't static anymore. It looked like movement, soft, slow waves, as if something was passing between the camera and the world. Then, through the distortion, I saw a figure appear at the edge of the frame. It wasn't clear. It wasn't solid. It was shaped like a person wearing a coat. It moved down the row, stopping at locker 29. And then it turned its head directly toward the camera as if it knew exactly where I was watching from. The fuzz cleared at 1:41. Row D became crisp again. The row was empty. Locker 29 was closed. The padlock hung in place like it had never moved. I didn't sleep well after that. I started dreading the minute hand approaching 1:40. I would watch the clock like it was a countdown to something I couldn't stop. A week later, a woman came into the office during the day to update her payment method. Small, tired eyes, polite voice. She gave her locker number. 29. I kept my face neutral. I asked her, casually, what she stored there. She didn't laugh. She didn't act confused. She paused, as if choosing words carefully, and said it was her brother's things. He'd died 2 years ago. She couldn't afford to get rid of it yet. I nodded. I printed her receipt. I wished her a good day. As she turned to leave, she looked back at me and said something that chilled me more than any camera glitch. She said she never got the key back from the police. She said the locker had been locked when she rented it. She said the manager told her not to worry about it because it locks itself. That night at 1:39, I sat in the office with the monitors up and the facility map on my desk. At 1:40, row D fuzzed. And then, for the first time, the office camera fuzzed too. The reflection of the monitor and the glass of the office door went cloudy, as if something invisible had stepped between me and my own image. My throat tightened. I didn't move. The radio crackled again, longer this time. In the static, I heard my name. Not shouted, not screamed. Spoken like someone standing right behind my chair, close enough to taste the coffee on my breath. I didn't turn around, because in the dark monitor reflection, I saw a figure standing behind me already. And I knew, with sick certainty. It hadn't come from row D, it had come from locker 29, and it had finally learned where the office is. The thing about storage is simple. You don't just keep objects, you keep what's attached to them. I worked a night hotline for a while. Not 911, but close enough to feel the weight of other people's emergencies press into your skull. The calls were usually predictable. Panic attacks, drunk arguments. Someone locked out in the cold. You learn to listen for the quiet details, breathing patterns, background noise, the way fear changes a person's cadence. On my last week, I started getting a call that didn't fit. It always came from a blocked number. It always connected without the usual pre-call beep. And when I answered, there was only silence. Not dead air silence. Not an empty line. A silence that sounded occupied. Like someone on the other end was holding their breath on purpose. I'd say the script. I'd ask if they needed help. Nothing. After 20 seconds, the line would click and disconnect. The first time, I logged it as a hang-up. The second time, I did the same. By the fourth time in one shift, my skin began to crawl, because the background silence had a texture. A faint, soft, scraping sound, like a finger circling the rim of a glass. And under it, barely audible, was something like distant breathing. Not the callers. Too close, too intimate. Like someone breathing directly into my ear. I asked my supervisor. They checked the system logs. The calls existed, but the origin couldn't be traced. No number, no route, no location. They told me to ignore it. Night work is full of glitches, they said. But the calls didn't stop. They started coming at the same time every night, 3:17 a.m., always 3:17. At 3:16, I would feel my stomach tighten. At 3:17, the phone would ring. On the seventh night, I didn't answer. I let it ring out. The light on my console kept blinking even after the ringing stopped. An incoming call that had ended, but still wanted attention. I stared at it, cold sweat prickling under my collar. Then my headset, resting on the desk, clicked on by itself. I heard breathing, not in the phone line. In my headset, close, wet, patient. I yanked the headset off and stood up so fast my chair tipped back. The office was empty. Rows of dark desks, a vending machine humming quietly, the air conditioner whispering. I checked the security door behind me, still locked, still logged. No one had entered. I sat back down, hands shaking. At 3:17 the next night, I answered. My voice was steady because I forced it to be. Some part of me believed that professionalism could ward off whatever this was. The line stayed silent. Then, very softly, I heard a sound I recognized. My own voice, not live. Not echoed. Recorded. A sentence I'd spoken earlier that night to another caller. It played back to me, slightly distorted, like it had been stored underwater. Then another sentence. Then a third. The call was playing my night back to me in fragments. As if someone had been collecting my words, cataloging them, learning them. My mouth went dry. I tried to disconnect the call. The button didn't respond. The screen on my console flickered and showed a line of text where caller ID should have been. Not a number, a phrase. Stay on the line. The breathing deepened. I felt it in my ear, in the headset, in the bones around my jaw. And then, in the quiet between breaths, I heard a tiny sound that made my blood run cold. A second set of breathing. In the room, right behind me. Oh, right behind me. I didn't turn. I kept my eyes on the console, on the glowing text, on the blinking light that refused to stop. The recorded fragments of my voice continued to play, building into something that sounded almost like a conversation with myself. And then, woven between my own words, another voice slipped in soft and careful, using my tone like a mask. It repeated the sentence that had ended one of my earlier calls. A sentence I'd said 100 times to strangers. But hearing it in my own voice, from a blocked line with something breathing behind me, made it feel like a threat. It said, "We can call again anytime." I stood up slowly, every muscle tight, and reached for the security button under the desk. My hand brushed something cold. A headset cord. Except the cord was wrapped around my wrist like a loose loop, as if someone had placed it there gently while I was sitting still. I left that job the next day. I told them I was sick. I never went back. For weeks afterward, at 3:17 a.m., my phone would light up in the dark with an incoming call from unknown. I never answered, but my voicemail would fill anyway. Each message was exactly 20 seconds long. No words, just the sound of someone breathing, patiently, as if waiting for me to remember what I promised without knowing it. Some calls don't want your help. They just want to make sure you're still listening.